welcome to the J&J Sip and Say. Today, Jill is out of town, so I have a very, very special guest. I'm very excited about this episode. He is an avid outdoorsman, hunter, fisherman. He's a Navy veteran. He is the associate pastor at our church, and he is also the father of twin boys. My good friend, Dan Kauffman. Dan, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Jake.
I appreciate you stopping by. So me and Jill have done quite a few podcasts we've at least touched on parenting in a lot of our podcasts, and we just have one son, 2-year-old. You have twins.
Yes, I
Two
do.
boys they're going to be, 4 in April?
Yep, for April 20th.
So I got to ask, how was it that doctor's appointment when the doctor told you guys you were having twins?
It was pretty incredible. It's really funny, actually, when we were there and they were doing the ultrasound. Erica thinks I make this up, but I feel like I saw the second son there. And so there was a technician that was doing it, and she was pretty new there. And so I guess their trainer or the doctor, whoever was behind her, and said, "Hey, wait a minute, go back. I saw something." And we had actually, unfortunately, had a bad miscarriage the year before. So my first instinct was, "Oh no, what is this? This is pretty scary." And then she's like, "There's 2 of them in there." And so, then it's just all smiles, giggles, like, what now? So it was kind of surprising, but very exciting.
Were there any nerves when you realized there was going to be 2 instead of that 1? Because I think a lot of people, I know, when we found out we were pregnant, twins do not run in our family, so we assumed there was 1. But was it kind of a shock, like, oh, there's 2?
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely something that I think we had joked around about quite a bit. My mom would give Erica a hard time and be like, "Hey, you're going to get 2 boys and all this stuff." And we would have fun with it, but we definitely weren't expecting it. So when we saw that, it was exciting. And I don't think the nerves set in for quite a while. We didn't know what to expect because these were our first kids. So, we didn't know what it was like to even have a single, let alone 2 of them at once. So
yeah, I think I had that mentality. We found out in early April that we were having Blair, and it was kind of like, well, I got 6 months.
Right.
I got 5 months. Until it happens, there's not that. Now, I mentioned you were in the Navy. Were you still in the Navy when you guys found out you were going to have twins?
Yes, we were. So I had been back from deployment for about a year. So we were kind of in what's called the yard period on the ship I was on. And so at that time, it was looking like it was going to work out pretty well, like I wasn't going to have to go anywhere. So I was there for all of Erica's pregnancy. And then I actually had some medical stuff come up for me. So I was off the ship for a couple months. And so that kept me home for a little bit as well. And then when the boys came early, most twins do. And so they were in the NICU for, I think, I should know the days. So Noah was in there a little longer than Hunter because Noah had some different complications. But they weren't in there terribly long. But they had come back for about a month or so, and then I had to go back out to sea. So that was a big adjustment because they weren't really used to, being at home life. Erica wasn't used to them being at home, and brand new parents, and then I had to go back out to sea. But it wasn't a long time. It was probably only a month, I think, or 3 or 4 weeks, something like that I went out for. But still, 2 brand new babies at home to leave, and I felt super guilty. And it was pretty funny, actually. I remember, I went back to work after that, and I was super blessed, had the best bosses in the world, greatest leadership, took care of me during that time when the boys were in the hospital, just great support. And when I went back, they're like, "Well, you've got to go out for this next underway when we go out to sea, but you're also coming up for rotation, so we got to start talking about orders and where you want to go next and that sort of thing." And so I remember calling Erica from the ocean out there, and I was like, "Hey, bad news is, I'm out here for another 2 or 3 weeks, however long it was or whatever." I said, "But the good news is when I come home, we're moving." And so it was kind of one of those deals where not only did I leave Erica at home for that time with the brand new babies to figure all this out, but she also kind of had to start getting the house ready for us to move across the country. So felt like, dad and husband of the year there.
Where were you guys at when the twins were born?
So they were born at Portsmouth Naval Hospital in Virginia. And then the next orders we got were to Colorado Springs in Colorado.
How was the change? How was that move? Because I know, Jill and I moved from a small duplex to a house, but it was just the two of us. It was relatively easy. What's it like moving across the country with twins?
Yeah, so it was a little stressful. The first part that we tried to plan it to where we would drive mostly at night, so the boys would be asleep, and we had both our vehicles. I had a trailer that I was pulling, and then the rest of our stuff was shipped with the military. They shipped it for us. But I remember stopping right outside Gallipolis, West Virginia, and Ohio area, and it was probably 6 hours into the drive or whatever, and Erica pulled over in front of me, and I could just see the look on her face when she got out of the car, like, I need a break now, because she had both the boys in the car with her, and then my truck was just loaded with stuff, and I had the dog, and I was like, uh-oh, and she's like, they've been crying for the last hour, we just need to stop. Yeah, so that was a little rough, and then we had about a month of leave time in between the move, and so we came back to Indiana, visited all our friends, and this was a lot of time, really the first time that a lot of our family got to meet the boys, and so they got to spend a lot of time with the boys, hang out with them, and then leaving from Indiana to Colorado, Erica's sister actually went out with us and rode with Erica to help with the boys, and oh man, that was such a blessing, because it was so much on all of us, because we actually didn't even have a place lined up to stay when we got to Colorado, so she would stay with the boys as we would go out and look for houses or apartments and all of that.
Having that family help is tremendous.
Absolutely.
We had it, when we brought Blair home with my parents and Jill's parents, that support system is huge. What role did you have in the military that caused you either, I don't know if you were lucky to move from Virginia Beach to Colorado, or like what were you doing at that time?
Yeah, no, I absolutely loved it. I would consider it extremely lucky. Not too many sailors get to go to Colorado, so I was in intelligence, and so I got to go out to work at NORAD and work on an Air Force base. So even though I was a sailor, got to live the Air Force life for a little bit, and it was awesome. All the branches give each other hard times, and my brother was Air Force, so I like to give those guys the hardest time, but they've got it made. Oh, it's a good deal.
What did intelligence include in the Navy?
So it just varied depending on what station you were at. So just a lot of classified work, just monitoring different things, depending on what mission set we were at. So
how did Colorado treat you guys?
Outstanding. Oh, it was awesome.
What part of Colorado were you in?
So we lived in Colorado Springs there, and it was incredible. An outdoorsman's paradise. I mean, I felt like it was always one of my dreams to bow hunt big bull elk, and so I was able to fulfill that dream there. And that was, unfortunately, that was actually the deciding factor of me wanting to go out there, was just to fulfill that dream. And but we all fell in love with it out there. And I had a cousin who lived in Colorado Springs, and we obviously knew each other, but we weren't very close. But in moving out there, we became so close, her family and my family, and they watched the boys all the time and just spent a lot of time with us. And now we talk to them pretty often, and so I'm more thankful for that than anything, actually.
Right. How long were you guys out in Colorado?
2 years.
2 years.
Yep.
What brought you back to Indiana?
Family and friends. So grew up here. My dad was Army, so I moved around quite a bit when I was younger, but moved here 4th or 5th grade, elementary age, and Erica's lived here pretty much her whole life. And so we just have that family connection, and starting to think about, now we've got kids and we're raising kids, and what's important in that. And so the people I want them around, and even if it, I'm super fortunate because we have such close families and they're great, but even if it wasn't for our families, it's just the people of Indiana. We go to the same church at Harris Chapel, and I've grown up in that church, and so there are people there that I've known since I was 8-9 years old that they're family, and so this whole community is family. And so I'm thankful to be back around people who care about my family, care about our successes and our failures and our life, and just love on us and do life with us. And
yeah, I feel like the Hoosier hospitality, that kind of comment or whatever is really true.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up here my whole life. My wife, she's from Ohio, which I consider very similar, but
Right.
Hoosier hospitality is a real thing. Now, while you were in the Navy, you did what, 7 years in the Navy?
6, yeah.
6 in the Navy. Was it always your plan to get into ministry, or is that something that came along later?
So it's an awesome story. I kind of compare myself to almost like a modern day Jonah. One of my study Bibles at home, I have wrote in the cover, in 2005, I was at a midwinter retreat for our district, and I was a teenager. I don't know how old I was at that time. I don't want to do the math, but I had wrote down in there that I felt like I had a call on my life to ministry. And I wrote in, I don't know exactly what that is, what that entails. And I remember our youth pastor at the time when we came back, he said, hey, you need to tell the church, you need to testify about this and let people know. And I remember testifying about it. And there's still a family at the church today that I remember the conversation we had with them afterwards. And they're like, we're going to continue to pray for this. And as life continued on, I kept working through trying to figure out what that calling was. And a little bit of, I think, me probably running from that calling, a little bit of me not knowing what that was exactly, led, my whole family was military. And so I knew that deep down inside, I still wanted to serve. I wanted to do something like that, and was like, well, let's serve. And I had full intentions when I joined the Navy of making it a career. And I loved it. I loved my time in the Navy. I really did. And, but it was probably, I'm thinking 2016, actually, I know it was 2016. I was driving down Virginia Beach Boulevard, and I was just taking a break, just going out to get out of the house for a little bit. And Erica and the boys were all napping, and I just was driving down. And I was praying, and I was like, God, what's next? I've got these orders getting ready to come up. What's next? Are we going to continue to do this? Am I going to go back to a sea rotation after Colorado? And what do you want me to do? And I just remember him saying, remember 2005. I've called you to do something. And I called Pastor Jim immediately, and I said, I don't know what this is, but I've just got a burden on my heart to go to graduate school for, something in ministry, biblical and theological studies, and all the programs I've looked into, I'm going to need a mentor. Would you be my mentor? And he's been my mentor since I was like 8 or 9. And he said, absolutely, let's pray about this and work with this. And before I had joined the Navy, I actually filled in temporarily at Harris Chapel as the youth leader there for about a year and a half, 2 years. So I had already been on staff with Pastor Jim and working with him. And he's like I said, he's poured into me my entire life. And so it was obvious that he was going to be the first person I called when I felt like God was saying, hey, I want you to do more. And even then, when I called him, I didn't know what that entailed. I didn't know what that was going to be. I just thought I was going to go to graduate school, and I had full intentions of, probably just getting some kind of intel job in Dayton, Ohio, and driving from Indiana to there and doing something like that, or Indianapolis or whatever. And it kind of worked out where we felt God just kind of grab a hold of everything and take control of it.
So when you had reached out to Pastor Jim and you realized this was your path that, God had kind of designated for you, what steps does it take to pursue ministry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first thing is to get a local license. And so we got me signed up to get a local license under our district, and that kind of gives me under Pastor Jim, I guess. And the board's got to sign off on it, Pastor Jim, and then our district. And that kind of just gives me the ability, or however you want to word it, to preach and work there at the church. And so right now I just got my district license, so they'll award me that in May at General Assembly, District Assembly there. And you have to do that for so many years. I think it's 3 or 4, and as you're working towards the credentials for ordination. So I'll graduate this August with a Master's of Arts from Trevecca Nazarene University in Biblical and Theological Studies, but I still won't have all of the credentials for ordination, so I'm probably 3 years out still from that.
How was that conversation you had with your wife, Erica, when you said, because I'm assuming you had a pretty good gig in the military, living in Colorado.
Yeah.
You said, hey, I want to move back to Indiana. I want to pursue ministry. I want to give up the military life. How did that conversation go down?
Yeah, so it kind of, I guess I should back up a little bit, a little differently. So she knew after my first command in Virginia, she did not want me to stay in the military, regardless of what I did.
It's a tough life on wives.
Yeah, it is. And my first command, I was super fortunate because I worked with incredible people, but we were gone a lot. I mean, I was gone a lot, and that took a toll on her. Then with the boys and, the scares at the beginning of their life, it just took a toll on her, and she's like, Colorado was considered shore duty, so I wasn't going to deploy during that time, but the next duty station, I'd be back on sea duty, which means more than likely I'm going to deploy. And so she was like, you know what? I don't care what we do, but I don't think this is it. And definitely a team effort. And so, I heard her on that, and I said, I like it, and it was a good gig, and God really blessed me in that endeavor. I was pretty good at it. Climbed ranks super fast, and it worked out really well, and I enjoyed it. But I had Erica before I had the Navy, and definitely. And then that call came back, and the call never left, but the call became more evident then, and we started to say, okay, this is what we're supposed to do. Maybe this is why you don't want me to stay in the Navy. Maybe this is why we had some of the hardships we had, is because I'm running from that call that God's put on our life. So
yeah, I think that's really huge to have a spouse, girlfriend, it's someone in a friendship or relationship that kind of keeps you in balance and has their own concerns, because it really helps out, because we all self-doubt ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there were times
yeah.
should I stay, should I go? And when you have that
Almost
rock beside you,
yep.
Me and Jill went through that when I was unemployed for 3.5 months. She was at rock, said no, do this, do that. So I understand. I'm sure that was huge, having that second opinion in your ear all the time that you really valued.
Yeah. No, it was super hard, because having the great leadership and support that I had in the military, they all wanted us to continue. They all wanted me to continue. They said, hey, you're killing it. Keep going. I mean, they took us out to dinners. They did all kinds of great things for us, and, really build it up, and told us all the opportunities. And the military does afford you phenomenal opportunities. I mean, not only the people you meet, but the places you go, the training you receive, just the education you receive through the military and training. And it's incredible. It really is. But so there was times where I'd be like, no, why am I doing this? I'm gonna put in a package for board next year. Like, why am I doing this? But then I also, I almost say it was like a burden on my heart, that I just knew I was supposed to do something different. And even though I enjoyed it and I was good at it, there was something on my heart saying, no, this isn't what you're gonna do your entire life. It's been a fun season, but it's time to do something different.
Yeah, I've known Pastor Jim for. We've probably known him a couple years, just going to the Y. That's how Jill and I got to know him, and we started going to Harris Chapel in last September. And I've never met someone so positive, so encouraging. What was his reaction when you reached out to him and say, Jim, I feel like I have this calling. Will you help me?
Yeah, exactly what you just described. Super positive, super encouraging. And that's really what I needed in my life at that time, was because it was, everybody saying, hey, you're doing great. Your military gives you all kinds of support. It's financial security. It's all this stuff. Why are you you're living in Colorado. Why are you going to throw all this stuff away and do something completely different almost, and go back to, technically going back to school for my master's and everything? You're starting over. What about the last 6 years? But Pastor Jim was right there to encourage me and say, if God's laid this on your heart, then we have to do it. This isn't something that we can just say, well, maybe if the time's right. He says, no, we have to do it. And he has always been, we call him our cheerleader, but he has always been one of my biggest supporters in life. And that's in everything too. Even when I joined the military, he was right there in my corner, pouring into me and pouring life into me. And, when we had all the stuff going on with the boys, even though we lived in Virginia, called and he'd pray with us and prayed for us. And I could go on and on about him. I'm so thankful for him.
Yeah, he's been a blessing to us. I mean, even we got to know Jim at a 5:15 a.m. spin class at the YMCA, and I'm a morning person. Right. I like to get up, but Pastor Jim is that guy. He shows up. He's encouraging people just in spin class on a Wednesday morning. And then when we started going to Harris Chapel, it was like, okay, this feels right. This feels good. So I could imagine the amount of encouragement he gave you guys.
And it's so genuine, and it's so natural. It really is for him. And it's in everything, and it's for everyone. He wants to see every single person succeed in whatever God has for their lives. And so, if I probably could have told him I wanted to start making underwater baskets, and he would have been like, "I'm right there with you. Get me one."
How do I do it?
Yeah.
So when you guys moved back to Indiana, because your boys were born in Virginia Beach and Colorado, of course. I don't want to say politically, but I think socially a little bit different atmosphere than we have in Indiana, which is more or less conservative. Were you guys excited to get back to more of a conservative I don't want to get political with it, but it's kind of that more conservative, family value, religious society here we have kind of in Indiana.
Yeah. I was, this we love Indiana. We love this area. This is home for us, and the connections we have. Really, the political side of Colorado didn't really start to affect me a whole lot while I lived there. Being military, I think I was shielded from a little bit of it, and then the church that we were involved in. It was a great church. It was a very large church, much larger than Harris Chapel. But at first I fought it so hard. It's so funny how it worked. My first year in Colorado, I was on what's called the watch, and so I had schedules where I'd work night shift, day shift, and it would go back and forth. And so there'd be 2 or 3 Sundays out of the month. Sometimes I'd be on shift and I wouldn't be able to go to church, but I'd be able to watch it online there at work or whatever. And the church was incredible, but there was no sense of community. And so I remember going in, and every Sunday I'd be like, well, this is the day that, I'm just going to be like, nope, not coming back. You know what? But the Holy Spirit just worked through the pastor, through and through, every Sunday. And every Sunday I could just feel the Spirit moving through people's lives. And so it's like, okay, even though there's no real I'm not connecting with anybody there, God's working here, and God's doing something. So that kept me going there. What I was most excited about coming back to whether I was going to be on staff at Harris Chapel or not, because, up until probably a month or 2 before the move, we didn't know we were going to be on staff at Harris Chapel, but I knew I'd be back at Harris Chapel. The thing that excited me the most about coming back here was the people. And, you mentioned the Hoosier hospitality, but especially at Harris Chapel, it's more than that. I can just feel the Spirit moving through people there and the connections with people there, and it's just friendly. They just genuinely want to connect with people.
Yeah, because the only people we knew when Jill and I started, because I didn't really grow up in church. Jill didn't either. I went to church with my grandma here and there. Not as welcoming. You go to church and people really didn't talk to you.
Right.
And the first time we went to Harris Chapel, of course we knew Jim, but that was it. And it was just this, everyone, hey, how you doing? Welcome. We want to,
right.
know about you, talk about you. And it was just great. And I could see someone, living out of state, away from family, wanting to come back to that kind of atmosphere.
Absolutely, yeah. You can't beat it. You really can't. And I would like to say that, that's just local just to our church, but it's not. It really isn't. And you mentioned coming back to this more conservative area. This whole area, Pastor Jim and I have been talking about this a lot. We believe that God's wanting to do something big in Delaware County, Indiana, and we can see it through different revivals at different churches. And He's on the move, and He's doing great things. And so, for people that are listening, we'd love to have you at Harris Chapel, but if not Harris Chapel, get into another church.
Right.
So, yeah.
When you guys move back here, we have boys a similar age.
Mm-hmm.
Blair's 2, your boys are pushing 4, mm-hmm. So they're going to grow up together.
Right.
Today's society is, I hate to say anti-masculine, but it kind of is,
right? Yeah.
In a sense. Mm-hmm. Does that concern you, raising your boys in today's kind of modern society?
It does. It's actually something I talk about almost every week. And so I'm super fortunate because I mentor some kids at the local junior high school and the local high school. And so I get to see all of the changes, that from when we were teenagers or whatever, that it's just a completely different world. And the expectations on them are different. I'm good, right, wrong, whatever. When I was an 8th grader or freshman, I wouldn't promote this or encourage this, but all I cared about was girls and sports, right? And so, and all through high school, that's what it was.
It was simple.
Yes, super simple. And now, these kids are dealing with so much more than what I had to deal with. Like decisions that they're making, the pressure that's put on them. It's intense, but they don't have the coping abilities, I feel like, that we were taught at least to handle those. And so, yeah, it makes me really nervous. So, I think when I look at, masculinity and being a man and how I want to raise my boys, obviously, I go to a biblical principle. I think of Ephesians 6 and, and different Proverbs and how I'm going to train up my boys. But it's more than just that. I think that, I know we were talking before this about the Order of Man podcast that we both listen to and stuff. And I think I heard it on there before, but I'm not sure. But I think the issue is a lack of time that is spent with young boys. I think there's not necessarily a manly mentor, whether that's their father, their grandfather, a friend, whoever it is. There's not somebody pouring into them to teach them what it means to be a man. And when I say what it means to be a man, I'm not talking about, just this, ooh, rah, 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 let's grunt. I'm talking about what it means to conduct yourself in a way that when life smacks you in the mouth, you're ready to handle it.
Right. Being a man isn't the guy who's wanting to pick a fight at a bar. It's being responsible for your family. You know, I mentioned earlier, I went through an unemployment period.
Mm-hmm.
It's how you react to those tough situations.
Exactly.
And I think it's important because I think society anymore, what's the divorce rate in our country? 50%?
Something.
I mean,
like
1 out of 2.
Yeah, grossly high.
And when you have that split home, and this is not, because I know single moms and single dads can do a great job raising kids, and a lot of them do because they have to. Mm-hmm. But I do not think you can beat the dynamic of a father and a mother in a home to bounce out that, the more the disciplinarian on the father, the nurturer of the mother, you bounce that out, and it produces typically a better child a lot of times.
Absolutely.
And I think our society as parents, that's a struggle right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's almost become a joke. Actually, I would say it is a joke that you'll see on social media, or you'll talk with different people, and women, they'll be like, I don't need no man. Me and my child don't need no man. Well, your son needs a man. He needs a man that's going to pour life into him and to teach him, to raise him up to be a man, because otherwise, I don't think they might not necessarily be able to fit the definition of a man unless someone teaches them how to be a man. And so, and that looks so different, and you're talking about that dynamic of both. Just last night I was at the Y working out, and I was only gone for like 45 minutes or an hour. But when I came back, both boys were already asleep. And Erica said, we were doing our movie night, and we had an event at the church, so I wanted to get my workout in before the event at the church. And she's like, we were doing a movie night, and the boys just kept saying, hey, we love movie night, but where's Dad? Because Erica was like, you like movie nights, don't you? Yeah, when Daddy and Mommy, Bubby, and me are here. And so even at 3 years old, they're already clinging to that when we're all together type of stuff.
Right, and I was very fortunate. Obviously, I grew up. I have an excellent father, I have an excellent mother, but I also had other guys in my life who were, my dad's buddies, I guess, but they all kind of gave me a little bit of street knowledge or a mechanical knowledge. I just had that, and I know every kid can't grow up with, a good father in their home, but if there's a mentoring program, whether it be the boys club or church events, Absolutely. I think that's important to get those young men, boys, that kind of structure
Absolutely.
Around them.
Yeah, and I'm super fortunate because I have a great godly father who literally he's poured life into me, has taught me all the things I love about the outdoors and all that, and had great grandfathers and all of that. But some of the men that mean the most to me in my life also, were just those type of guys that you were describing. And so they were, there's a guy still at the church today, Kevin, that I fish with him all the time. We shoot our bows together all the time, and for no reason, he's just mentored me and poured into me my whole life, and just because he cares about people, and that's what I think the key is. Whether it's a relative or not, it's taking that time to stop and connect with a young. We're talking about boys here in masculinity, taking that time to stop and connect with one of those young kids and say, hey, I may not have it figured out what it means to be a man, but this is what I do know, and taking that time to pour into them.
I think it's really important because, you're what, early 30s? Right?
Turn 30 next month.
Okay, so you're late 20, early 30.
Yes.
I'm 34. I think it's important for guys our age who, I don't want to say have it figured out, but we have a kind of an idea of what's going on, to help those younger kids who don't have a clue. Blair's fortunate. He's going to have a good father and a good mother. Mm-hmm. Your boys are going to have a good father and a good mother. But to help out those, those friends, because I remember growing up with kids in school, and I didn't realize at the time, who didn't have a dad at home. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know, I didn't know, dad was either a druggie, dad was divorced and they left town. I like to be able to help those kids too.
Yes.
You can't be the complete father, but if you could just kind of guide them a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And through I feel super blessed that God's kind of placed me in these ability or these opportunities to be mentors in the schools and get to see these kids, and and I've talked with a lot of the administrators, a lot of the teachers and stuff, and you see these kids and whatever their behavioral actions, their academics, or whatever is struggling. Usually it's because of an outside situation. It's not because of something that's going on there at school. It's because of whatever the outside situation is. And they deal with so much, and it's so hard. And, I only get to see them maybe for an hour a week, but I want to be intentional with that hour that I have. And whether it's help them with math homework or whether it's say, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? And just be a friend, just be an ear for them to talk to, because they may not have an ear at home.
Yeah, you don't know. It's one thing I've really learned the last couple years, especially going to Harris Chapel, is you don't always know what people are going through.
Right.
You see them on the street, you talk to them, they might seem distant, they might seem bitter. At first, years ago when I was a little more immature, I would have been like, "Oh, hey, what's your problem?" Mm-hmm. Now I'm like, "Hey, I'm curious of what's going on."
Right.
And it's one thing for a 35-year-old to do that, but when you got a 12-year-old who doesn't have something at home, that mentoring, I hope working through the churches, boys club, whatever it is, to get that kind of guidance, and not only help our boys, our sons, mm-hmm. but help their buddies, because
right.
they're going to bring home a buddy who doesn't have a dad, doesn't have a mom, and that's just the way it is.
Right. And that's something that we've talked about too, is, Erica's family's real big into basketball and sports, and I did not get that ability, so I am not good at very many sports, but everybody's like, what do you hope the boys do? And really, and this is not to be cliche or anything like that, I don't care what they do. I just want them to love other people because of exactly what you just said. It's always been... you always see and hear these stories of just cruelty in schools, of how, people are just bullied and mean to each other, and, some real heartbreaking situations. And my prayer is that as a father and trying to raise, they're 3 years old, but I still can see God has given me visions of what they're going to be like as young men. And I'm trying to raise godly young men that are going to stand up for those people that need a friend, that they're going to love on people that need to see love. That's my only desire as a father, is to teach them and raise them that, follow me as I follow Jesus. The teachings of Paul there, exactly.
Right,
and
right.
So,
and to add on that, I want Blair to be that, that young man in school that stands up for the kid getting picked on. I want him to be that friendly person, but I also want him to take on traits and hobbies I've taken on, whether mm-hmm. it be, you mentioned we're both into fishing, hunting. I'm really into shooting, mm-hmm. sports. Not just because those are quote unquote manly things.
Right.
The lessons you learn from those. I learned more from sports by losing. Mm-hmm. I learned more from the outdoors. If you're taking an animal's life, of what that's like, and right. how to be a responsible firearm owner. Like, take those lessons, because it's not just that.
Right.
You can take that and then expand it to everything else in the world.
Mm-hmm. And especially like in the realm of sports too. I wasn't good at sports, but I played soccer, I played volleyball, and I played baseball up until high school. And you just learn teamwork. You learn cooperation. You learn leadership. Even at that age, you're learning leadership, and so all those things are incredibly important. And selfishly, I want the boys to be into bow hunting as much as I am. But we shoot I've been having them shoot a bow since they were just shy of 2. They go out with me almost every evening and launch arrows with me. And everybody's like, what if they don't like to hunt? What if they don't like to fish? And I'm like, jokingly, I'm like, well, then they can start paying rent. But I think that because of the time and the investment, and not only is it enjoyable for me to watch them, but I think it's important to them to see that I'm investing that time in them. I'm making them a priority to teach them something. And they may be 30 years old before they ever realize that, but I think eventually they'll realize that and say, wow, Dad put that time or that invested in me into whatever it is, whether it's hunting, fishing, or
right.
whatever. So.
Yeah, and I think, if you develop those habits, you talk about going out and shooting archery every evening. Me and my dad's gotten a habit. We go to the range every Saturday morning. We're shooting our pistols. That discipline, mm-hmm. that, okay, I got to get up and do something. And it can be the littlest thing, and I used to, when I was in my 20s, like I said, a little more immature, I never made my bed. I
Mm-hmm.
never did this, but I'm like, all right, I got to make my bed every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's just those little things. If I can just instill those little things into Blair and, you with your twins, and it just builds and builds and builds. And before you know it, you have a kid that's going to be ready to tackle the things in the world, because the world's hard. We've all been through it.
Right, right. Yeah. And so, yeah, absolutely. And those are all little life lessons. And I think that, as we're looking at an anti-masculine culture society now, I think that's one of the keys to taking it back is, to teach those life lessons. I mentioned earlier, how are you going to react when life hits you? And so whether that be through sports or just intentional time doing whatever with these young boys, I think that's how, we instill that into them.
Yeah, because life's going to hit you.
Yeah, and it's going to hit hard.
Yeah. My first kind of slap in the face was I graduated college in the winter of 2008, literally 2 months after the giant market crash.
Right.
There were no jobs.
Right.
All right, here's your first smack in the face. Welcome to the real world. I lost my job unexpectedly. How do you react to that? And if you can build that kind of that base at a younger age and build it and build it and build it, those kids are going to be such an advantage when they get older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's those experiences that they can rely back on too. And I like to think about. I started journaling this last year, and it was for a class at first, and it was like a prayer journal, and it. Well, what it's really just dwarfed into is I like to record the different ways that I feel God moving in my life. So when those moments do happen where life hits you, I can go back and say, and remember when God carried me through whatever that situation was, when I experienced him in such a real way that it got me through some situations. I was so fortunate growing up that I wouldn't say it was sheltered necessarily, but I didn't have anything hard until I became an adult. I mean, that's just the truth. My grandfather died when I was in college. I was the first death that I had to experience. So I didn't have that at a young age. Had two parents that loved each other, loved God, loved their kids. Everything was great. Had, smoking hot wife. Everything was great. And then as soon as I joined the military, I think it was a matter of months. I left for a 9-month deployment. Come back. We're like, hey, let's start a family. Had a miscarriage. That was the first time I'd ever, dealt with anything like that. The pain that I had to watch Erica go through and all that. And then the scare with the boys. And it was a period of about 2.5, 3 years right there where life was starting to kick my teeth in just a little bit. And all things, you look back on it now and it's like, well, a lot of those things happen to a lot of people, but I had never really experienced a lot of life. So for that all to happen in that short period of time was pretty intense for us. And, but I can look back now when small things happen or big things and say, here's how God enabled me to react to this situation. Here is how I was able to get through the situation and keep trekking on, keep carrying on. And that's what we want to raise our boys to do. I mean, I know that's what you want to do.
Right, you're right. This sounds weird. I was very fortunate. When I was 15, my appendix ruptured. It was a near-death experience. It was a 50-50 surgery. I mean, it was very serious.
Wow.
I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. 3 days in ICU. So at 15, I kind of get that mortality check. It was kind of like things can't end very quickly.
Yeah.
So that kind of set me up at an earlier age than I think most 15, 16-year-olds are, hey, I'm invincible.
Right.
I can do anything I want.
We don't think anything like that. Yeah.
At 15, that got smacked out of my face. And I was like, nope, you can't do that. So I think that's something I don't think you can teach someone, but you can learn from it.
Absolutely.
So when that first, when I graduated college in a bad economic time, it wasn't a big deal. When I lost my job last fall, it wasn't a big deal. It's not life or death.
Right.
Now, like you mentioned, going through miscarriages and then your twins are struggling in NICU, that's real world. That's scary.
Yeah, it was terrifying, and I didn't have any time, to even compare anything like that to. And I think, kind of going round circle back to what we talked about at the beginning is just connecting yourself with great people. So at that time in Virginia, we were going to a phenomenal church there, and we were super close with the pastor and the assistant pastor's family. And I remember calling them. We'd got the call. They thought that Noah had necrotizing enterocolitis or something like that. NEC is what it's called for short. And I had Googled it, which, it's the worst thing to do
Bad
ever.
idea.
Yeah, the worst thing ever. And so it's like 2:00 in the morning, and I can't sleep, obviously, because I'm terrified. And Erica gets a phone call and says, "Hey, you guys need to come to the hospital." She's half asleep. We haven't slept at all. And this is probably day 7 or 9 of them being in the NICU. And she's like, "Hey, they said we need to go to the hospital. Something's wrong with Noah's neck." And I'm like, "His neck?" And she's like, "Yeah, you just kept saying neck." And I'm like, "Neck is in like NEC or neck is in NECK?" And she's like, "I don't know." And so I call the hospital, and I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" And they tell me, they're like, "We're pretty confident he has this." And the mortality rate for that in premature babies is like 60 or 70%. I mean, it was a very grim outlook. And so I just remember at that very moment, like, just my chin hitting the floor and just sobbing and crying and like, God, I don't know what to do here. And I'm trying to be strong for Erica. I've still got Hunter in the NICU. And so it's like, I don't know what to do here. And so moving forward from that, I immediately called my pastor there in Virginia, and I texted Pastor Jim back here. But I called him and I said, "Hey, can we swing by the church and just go pray at the altar before we go to the hospital?" And I remember for the first time ever, I like to talk, but for one of the first times ever, I couldn't even find the words to pray. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. And I kept saying, "Give me strength for my family. Give me strength for my family. Heal Noah, and then give me strength to carry this family. You've blessed me with this family." And, selfishly in my mind, I'm like, I've already, we had the miscarriage. I wanted to be a dad so bad. And so we already had the miscarriage, and it was like, I don't want something to happen, like, at all. Like, there's nothing inside of me that's okay with anything that's going on. And I remember just the two men, David and Bill. Bill's senior pastor, David was the associate pastor. I remember them just laying hands on me and just praying with me at, this is like 4:30 in the morning or something like that, and just praying with me at the altar. And all three of us are just pouring our hearts out. And I think that's just critical, to surround yourself with people that are going to support you when life hits like that too. And so great men of God right there that, helped me being a young man. I don't remember how old I was, but, early 20s, to carry me through that time. And then we got to the hospital, and wouldn't you know it, that some resident had read the test wrong, and it was just gas moving through his intestines rather than, what they thought it was. So,
Thank you. Nice.
Yeah. So, but, part of me was like, "Are you kidding me?" And then the other part of me was like, "Praise God, I'm just so thankful. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm just thankful."
That's a great point you brought up there. I think a lot of times as men, we feel like, because, our wives rely on us, our children rely on us, we have to be the rock.
Mm-hmm.
I really feel that's the important part of being a man of a family, is you have to be the rock.
Right.
Sometimes that's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
You have to surround yourself with men who are as stronger, more experienced than you are. You mentioned your pastor and your friend. For me, things I went through. I had my father, who's just wise beyond his years. When I lost my job, I went to Pastor Jim. I talked to you. I think men we have to be this. We have to be the dominant. We have to be the lone wolf. We have to be the guy that can do everything by ourselves. We got to have men around us.
Yeah, exactly.
Good people to talk to. And I think it's important for, just us having this conversation, or, having some sort of a men's group. Mm-hmm. We don't have to go through it alone.
Right.
As men, we think we have to be the dominant male. We have to be the lone wolf that can support our family and no worries. But the truth is, we need support.
Absolutely.
And it has to come from other men, and typically men who are more experienced. I think it's so important. We talked about mentoring youth. There are guys in their 50s or 60s I reached out to when I have questions.
Absolutely.
Whether it be my father, Pastor Jim, whoever. Don't be afraid to go out and ask for help.
Right.
Because it's important.
Yeah, and it goes back to iron sharpens iron too, right? And so I mentioned Kevin earlier, but I call Kevin all the time. And, if I have a question about just a life situation or something like that, and, I'm super fortunate because I'm close with my dad too, but if I want another outside take, I'll call Kevin and be like, "Hey, this is on my mind. What do you think about this?" Or, "Have you ever heard of it?" Well, I mean, whatever. And sometimes I pick his brain about things. He's probably like, "Shut up, Dan." But, that, and I don't know, he's old, he's in his 50s, but, he's been a mentor to me even still to this day. And I need him in my life. And it's really hard, like you're saying, how it's hard to be the rock, because I don't want to show different vulnerabilities in my life. I don't, especially, and this is real truth here, but I've got to be the rock for a lot of people, right? And so I am so thankful because I can feel God giving me the strength to be the rock in that situation.
I feel like your burden's even more because being an associate pastor or a pastor of a church, everyone's looking towards you.
Yeah, and at times, yeah, I definitely could feel that, and I think that's where it really comes down to. Where I'm super thankful for Jim, for Pastor Jim, because I can talk to him and say, hey, this is on my heart or whatever, but I've also got to have somebody else, whether it be you, whether it be Ross, David, a couple of the other guys at church there, that I can just talk to, because regardless of wherever we're at in life, we're still on this journey together. And so you're going to have life experiences that I'm not going to have. God's going to have done things in your life that he hasn't done in my life. And I believe that's our responsibility to share that with each other, because you may be able to sharpen me in whatever situation I'm going into, and vice versa.
Yeah, because I feel like we're both very, very fortunate to have incredible wives.
Yeah, yeah.
Jill's incredible. Erica's
we married up.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. First rounders.
Yeah.
That support's great, and we've gone through our trials and troubles, not with each other, just life in general.
Right.
And she's a rock, and I know Erica's a rock, but sometimes you kind of need another man's advice or just an opinion to bounce ideas off of. And I think so many guys are just like, well, I can do it on my own. I can do it on my own. No, it's okay to ask for help.
Right.
And it's hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
But, one thing I've learned, talking to you, talking to Jim, even my dad, it's just, hey, I have this situation. What would you do?
Right.
And usually it helps.
Yeah.
Always helps.
And if anything, just I think being a sounding board too, just to say, hey, for whatever it's going on, just to throw an idea and bounce it off of another man to say, this is what I'm thinking, or this is what's going on. How should I respond to this? And not necessarily that you have to do whatever that person says, but it gives you options too, because their mind's gonna go a different way than maybe what your mind was gonna go, and so they may have an experience in that field that you didn't even know about, and then it comes back and they're like, oh, I never even thought about that. Thank you. And so, and I think that's where that, and it's hard for guys, it really is, but that openness with each other too, and I think that's kind of, not to I'll keep going back to biblical examples, but to go to a biblical example, I think that, as Jesus did life in his ministry, that's why he called the first 12, right? That was his sounding board that he was starting his ministry to, because what do? Then they go get the 72, and then they go out to all corners of every nation.
Right.
And so, kind of the same way, because we got to have a sounding board. And so that sounding board is our strength and our encouragement. And, we were talking about how Pastor Jim encouraged me and gave me strength during that time. It was not just that. I mean, literally it was like, I would throw an idea to him, and it would be like he would throw it right back, but it's just loaded with experience or wisdom or whatever. And you can't get that if you don't throw it out there, and so you got to have somebody there to throw it to.
Yeah, I think it's important, because I know there's I know Harris Chapel has a men's group on Wednesday mornings, but I think it's important, and you have to have people with who are older with more experience. But I also think it's important to get people your own age. Like you mentioned Ross, David, there's a group of us at our church that are kind of the same age. We're all going through the same thing, but we're all going through something a little bit different. And
right.
that bounce can really help each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so Ross and I, when I first moved here, so 4th grade, Ross and I have been, great friends since then, and grew up together and did life together. But having somebody like that, having somebody that I trust, that I can talk to about whatever, that's critical. It really is, because like you said, even though we're similar walks in life, they're still different. And we just last year's motto that Pastor Jim had was better together, and I just truly believe that. I just truly believe that we're better off together, and that's what the example Jesus gave us, and that's just what I see in my life too. The Navy was great, and I had all those great friends and great leadership, but it was still a little lonely. Especially my job was lonely. I couldn't really talk about what I did, so it was like I worked out, and then I went home, and so it was a little lonely at that time, and I didn't have necessarily the close Christian friends and accountability partners while I was in the Navy that I needed, and so that's probably why it seemed a little lonelier. Great people, great friends. Talk with them still to this day. Really close with them, but I wouldn't necessarily open up with them about some things that I would with some of my brothers in Christ that I have here, I guess.
Right,
yeah.
right. So what's going on moving forward? You guys have your twins,
Yep.
and there's another one on the way.
Yes, number 3.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, so be here August 1st and July timeframe. Yep.
And I hear you guys are wanting to start an outdoor ministry.
Yes.
Could you kind of delve in the details of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was kind of when we first got, that clarification on on the call on my life on what that was going to look like. And we're still working through the details, definitely, but it's a lot of the concepts that we've been talking about tonight, right? This intentional discipleship. That's my heart. That's the example I see when I read through Scripture that Jesus had. He discipled others so that they could disciple others, so that they could disciple others, and it just continues on. And so that's my heart. And I don't think that God gave me this passion for the outdoors, to hunt, fish, hike, and camp, just for me to selfishly enjoy, right? Because there's going to be kids, adults that may never get to experience it unless somebody takes them. And so our goal is to eventually have a facility where we're gonna have different outdoor activities that take place on this facility, and whether that be archery, axe throwing, kayaking, canoeing, camping, that sort of stuff. And then we want to plan a church with it too. So a Saturday night type of service there. That's where we feel God leading us right now, is to have a Saturday night service there at the facility. But until we're able to, make that happen, we're thinking that it's going to look like intentional discipleship through spiritual type of retreats. So whether that be a men's get together for a fishing week, somewhere, maybe we do a fly-in in Canada or whatever like that. We use our passions for the outdoors to intentionally disciple people and talk about matters of the heart.
Well, I think the outdoors is the closest you can get to that relationship with God and Jesus, because it's just so natural. Mm-hmm. I mean, anyone who's gone out, I don't care if you've hunted, you went fishing, you're going hiking, kayaking, whatever. When you get out in nature mm-hmm. and it's quiet, there's a calm, there's a peace, there's just this rejuvenation I have. I always tell my dad, I said, when we launch the boat on Saturday morning and we're on that fishing spot at 5 a.m., the sun's coming up, mm-hmm. there's a bald eagle flying in the sky, like that is the most peaceful I probably am all week. Mm-hmm. And if you can share that with people who've never experienced right. it, they'll just latch onto it.
Right. Yeah. It's an awesome general revelation of how powerful and how awesome God is. Right. To enjoy His creation. I learned something awesome. Recreation. If you break it up into recreation, it's learning how to enjoy creation a different way. Right. And so recreation was an intentional thing by God for us to enjoy His creation. Obviously, be good stewards of it and all of that as well. But to truly enjoy it and see just the masterpiece of His hand. And talking about guy type stuff. I would assume it's a whole lot easier for guys to really get a little bit more personal, a little bit open up a little bit more, sitting around a campfire at a cabin somewhere, or sitting up at a campfire on a mountain somewhere with 6, 7, 10, 12 guys than it would be, maybe in a service somewhere else. It's going to create an atmosphere where men, women, children, teens, whoever are going to feel a little more open and comfortable to share, because, this is something that Pastor Jonah and I have been talking about a lot, and we've been praying about. Church may look completely different in a decade. Maybe even sooner, maybe 2 decades, 3 decades, however, it may look completely different, but the mission still stays the same, God still stays the same, and the way He wants us to do, His work, or how He calls us into His work, is still the same.
Right, and, the energy in that chapel on Sunday morning is amazing,
Oh, yeah.
especially at Harris Chapel. I love it. But if you don't have to be in four walls. If you're with
Yes.
like-minded people out at a campground, on a lake, hiking on a trail, and you reach this, this hilltop or whatever, if you can get that energy out in nature, and it sounds like that's what you guys want to do with
Absolutely.
your ministry,
Yeah.
to go out and experience that. And I hope everyone can go out and experience that. And it's not expensive.
Right.
Here in Indiana, we have Summit Lake State Park, Mound State Park, Prairie Creek Reservoir, Westwood, Brookville. I mean, within an hour and a half a month, you have multiple state parks. Go out and see nature.
Right.
Go out with like-minded people and enjoy that, these blessings that we do have.
Yeah, and this vision, it wasn't just mine. That's the beauty of it too. So I felt this call on my life, and as I'm working through it and praying about it, God has given my wife Erica multiple visions for it as well. So we're working, together on this and praying about what it looks like. And so, once the actual, I guess we're going to call it a base camp or whatever. Once the base camp gets set up, we have desires and goals of, having all kinds of just different events there that are going to help people in more ways than just learning the outdoors, right? So not just to learn how to hunt, fish, or spend that time with people, but it's going to be a way for people to really connect with other people, have some genuine, true fellowship, some true discipleship. We've thrown around a lot of ideas, and a lot of it's still in the works, but I think it's going to be a place where people are going to be able to discover healing, discover just love, really, to be honest with you, and maybe they'll discover a passion that they didn't know they had too for something in the outdoors.
Yeah, you and I are both fortunate. We grew up in the outdoors.
Yes.
We grew up hunting and fishing, so that's always been a part. But when people see that for the first time, I mean, your mind's even. Like I said, I've fished so many times. I've been on so many lakes. I've hunted so many times, but still, every morning you get up and you see that sunrise, or you see that bald eagle, or you get that first whatever it is.
Right.
It's still there.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
just see someone experience that for the first time. That's great. So, I mean, I hope that goes well. Any help you guys need on that, please let us know.
Oh, definitely.
Definitely want to help out. So, Dan, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Great conversation. And I look forward, maybe here in a few months, we'll touch base again. We'll have you back on, see where this ministry thing's going, and go from there. So, appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Good luck with the twins and the new one coming along.
Yes. So things are going to get exciting.
When's the due date?
So August 1st is what they. That's what they
man.
told us. Yeah. So
That's gonna be here before you know it.
it will be. Yeah. And I graduate in August too, so it's a lot of changes coming up in August.
A lot of celebrations.
Yes.
Do you guys have you guys found out, or are you going to find out?
So Erica wants to wait, and I do not. So I'm chomping at the bit, but we can't find out until I think 2 more weeks or something.
Okay.
Something like that. So we're talking about maybe us finding out, doing a gender reveal, or something silly, or we may just find out and not tell anybody. But
Yeah.
as long as I know, but I give her a hard time. But if she really does want to keep it a surprise, I'm okay with that.
That's the way Jill is. Jill's a big planner. She's like, I have to know.
That's how I am
Hey,
too.
I'm
right?
like, hey, you're carrying the baby, whatever you want. So, all right, man. I really appreciate your time.
Yes, thanks for
guys, subscribe, enjoy the podcast, and we'll catch you next time.